party. We need to talk about that later on. And so as a result, Rob took that out and he just put Seed Sue, and that's the way it sets up.
That's pretty funny. Did anybody drop you because you were head of a white nationalist party?
Oh yeah, I've had people drop me, but I've had people hire me too. And overall, I've got more gains than losses, so I don't mind.
Cool. Well, Paul, are we going to see you in the Canadian flag? In terms, we did very well last week, but a couple of people asked what that weird flag was you had.
Oh, are we alive?
We're live. We are live from Los Angeles and Hamilton, Ontario, right? Did I say that?
Oh, I had a question for Bill Johnson, but I guess I can ask it on the air. How did the Japan First Party do in those elections for the Diet? I saw a lot of their publicity, but I didn't see the results.
Well, I'm not sure. They didn't tell me about the results, but they did send me a very nice manga,
Yes.
a cartoon that they sent around. In fact, I think I have it somewhere.
Yes, I got one too. Very nice. I wish I could understand it.
It talked a lot about me, and maybe I don't have it. Maybe I guess I autographed the last one and sent it to Donald Trump. So I don't have it.
Very good.
But it went around all around Tokyo. But if you look through it, it talks a great deal about me and Congressman Virgil Goode. And it talks about our interaction with Heidi Beirich of the Southern Poverty Law Center and Jared Taylor. And during that meeting, Jared Taylor was kind of the avuncular man sitting back. And the American First, the Japan First two people were really going at it with Heidi Beirich, and I was translating, and Paul and Jared Taylor was translating, but I ended up stepping in and kind of protecting a little bit Heidi Beirich from these kind of assaults by the American First Party, and so that's all listed in the manga, the comic book, where they confound leftist Heidi Beirich, and they put her in her place, and Johnson acts as kind of the mediator, helping things out, and Jared Taylor's there. So it's kind of a fun little presentation. So
translated in English?
All in Japanese. It's all in Japanese. It was distributed to all of the voters in the Tokyo districts where these Japan First parties are running. And so basically what had happened was they asked me, they said that they're coming to America. They want to meet with me as the chairman of the American Freedom Party. And they also want to meet with some extreme leftists. So I said, what leftists can I meet up with? So I called up Jared Taylor and I said, what leftists can they meet up? And they're going to come to Washington, D.C. He said, well, they got to meet with Heidi Beirich. She's in the South, but she's a good leftist to meet with. So I got Heidi Beirich's phone number or email from Jared Taylor, and I called her up and I said, hey, Jared Taylor introduced us, and the Japan Nationalist Party is coming over here, and they want to meet with a leftist. And she says, oh, and Jared Taylor gave me a number. She says, oh, Jared Taylor gave you my number? She was just as giddy as a schoolgirl. I'd like to meet with him. You're going to be meeting with him in DC? I want to come. And so can you have Jared Taylor show up too? She was so enamored. She wanted to meet Jared Taylor so badly. So I set up a meeting with them. And she says, well, I want to meet with Jared Taylor alone before you guys come. So we sat there. And so then they had their give and take. And so then we arrived later, and Jared Taylor and Heidi Beirich was there at a Japanese restaurant in DC area. And we had a very nice, pleasant meeting. And Heidi Beirich says, look, everything that's said is going to be off the record. We're not going to say anything at all. And Jared Taylor says, everything we say is going to be off the record. I won't say anything at all. William Johnson said, everything that we say is not going to be off the record. We're not going to say it at all. And the Japan Life Party says, we're going to print everything we want. And so they did this, but that was like a couple of years ago. So they put it in there.
What did she make of them? I mean, their hardcore nationalism, their opposition to really to foreigners, especially being present in their country, like Koreans and Chinese must absolutely violate her worldview, where the only racists are whites, whereas the way of the world is, I hate to use the word racist, but we tend to prefer our own no matter what people we are.
Well, you have to realize that where Heidi Beirich comes from, she is truly a bleeding heart German leftist. She is 100% German. Her father was a politician. He was mayor of Palm Springs well before Sonny Bono was mayor of Palm Springs, and she was raised really wanting to do good, to help all of these poor people from all around the world to rise up and become like the white people. She truly had the sense of white person's burden, coming from a position of, well, we got to help them out, not from the Rudyard Kipling concept of white man's burden, but from her viewpoint that white people that are nationalists want to suppress all these people, and she really wants to raise them up. She truly comes from a position of she wants to help other people. And so I thought, well, now that things are getting so bad and that the white people are getting the butt end of all of this criticism and we're being discriminated against, that maybe she'll come around and want to help us. So when this magazine, this manga came out, I called her up. I had a number. I called her up. I said, "Hey, did you get the manga?" She says, "No." Can you get me a copy? Send me a copy? Sure, I'll have them send you a copy. And I said, "But are you coming around to our point of view?" She says, "No, Johnson, not at all." And so she's still not one of us. But I arranged for the Japan people to send her a copy.
Well, it's really interesting. Not just the Japan First people I met in Japan, but many relatively ordinary Japanese. Once they get to trust you, the things they'll tell you. I mean, these people they just detest the Koreans in their midst, and they detest the Chinese. And they told me most of the gangsters, or at least in their opinion, were Koreans. I mean, the sort of talk that maybe was prevalent in America 50, 60 years ago about minorities, but now we're even white nationalists tend to be fairly cautious.
I've heard that argument. I've heard that's those statements from the Japanese for decades.
Yes.
This is about maybe 20 years ago. I had a Japanese person send me an email, or no, probably a fax. I don't think the emails were there. They sent me a fax saying, "Johnson, I would like you to go down to the downtown Japanese bookstore in Los Angeles and pick up some books regarding the Jews written in Japanese and send them to me, because we can't really get them here very, very well. I want to see what's there. I'm doing research." So I went down to this major Japanese bookstore in downtown Los Angeles that was, really popular, really big. So I go up to the clerk and I say, "I'd like to have some books written about the Jews." And he says, "Oh, do you want the pro-Jewish section or you want the anti-Jewish section?" And so I said, "The anti-Jewish section." "Well, that's over there." And I pass by the pro-Jewish section and it's about this big. I go to the anti-Jewish section and it's about that big. And I picked up some books and I thought, gee, if the LA establishment knew that this bookstore had those in there, they'd be picketed. So yeah, that's the mindset of the Japanese back then, and I still hear it on occasions today.
What were some of the examples of the kind of books that they had against Jews? And I mean, there are not a lot of.
I have no idea. That was 20 some years ago. I can't remember. I don't remember what they were, but they were translations of probably some of the books that you have on your shelf, Charles.
Well, I mean, and I just wanted to know about this manga. Is there any chance that you could talk them into getting an English translation of this manga?
Well, I looked through it and I thought, I don't want to worry about translating because a lot of it's in the vernacular. So one of the reasons why I had Heidi Beirich get a copy is this, well, she may want to get it translated. And so I said, I'm going to have you give you a copy, but if you translate it, send me a copy of it. So she may do that. I mean, I could translate it, but it would just take too much time. And I'm not, uh, I'm
Maybe
not
you
that
could
interested.
you could get her with the untold millions they have to get it translated, and you could bung the translation offer saying, "Well, my English is a little rusty these days."
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't want to. Yeah, no, it'd be too much work for me to
But
translate.
you're very fluent in Japanese, aren't you?
No, I
No.
am fluent enough to do, when the clients can't speak English, I'll speak to them in Japanese, and I'm fluent enough to get all sorts of business from them. But I started studying it when I was an adult. But and so if the client speaks English, I speak to him in English. I have a number of clients that I only deal with in Japanese. I'm quite good at reading and writing, which is unusual for Japanese. Usually most countries, most languages, you can read and write before you can speak. But Japan, it's such a crazy language, and it's so hard to learn to read and write that once you get so you can read and write it, it's really convenient, but it's hard to achieve. Because like in Chinese, you think Chinese is so hard, but Chinese only have one pronunciation for one character. The Japanese, some of these kanji, some of these characters, there'll be 23 pronunciations for one darn character. So yeah, it's tough to get there, but I'm good at reading and writing, and I'm okay at speaking. I mean, I have been a translator in front of the courts. Jared Taylor was a translator in front of the courts all the time. He did a great job, and I had to do it one time, and I felt so inadequate. I thought, gee, I shouldn't be doing this. But I remember I took the bar in Arizona many years ago, and I'd been a lawyer for like 25 years, and I thought, gee, I shouldn't be doing this either. So we all have our doubts about our abilities.
Well, I'm only in kindergarten. I've started a bit of study of Japanese, but
Okay, good.
but it really, one of the things that throws me is that there are three alphabets. There's the kanji,
Yeah.
and then there's the hiragana and the katakana, and
Yeah, but the katakana, hiragana, easy. Now, are you in your pajamas? Is that why we can't see you?
no, well, there is. Well, you can't see anything, eh?
No, I can't see you at all. So why don't you go? We'll pause, put on some clothes, and then turn on your screen.
No, unlike one, I'm going to have to find out how to do that. Unlike one of our parliament was meeting for months and months virtually, and twice the same member of parliament didn't realize he had his camera on and was buck naked. He didn't win in the recent election, but he was an idiot anyway. But I don't understand. Where is the camera?
I don't know. You have to. I'm more of a Luddite than Charles is. But if you click at the very bottom, isn't there like if you take the mouse over the bottom, it should say that.
Yeah, I just clicked on video. Choose integrated webcam, video settings. The host has asked you to start your video. Yeah. Can't start video. Failed to start the video camera.
Yeah. We know that you're like that congressman in Canada. You're not dressed.
Well, actually, I am dressed.
But actually, I am quite pleased that you use the term buck naked, because the younger generations don't say buck naked. They use a word that my mom wouldn't allow me to say growing up. But why is it called buck naked? Do you know?
I don't know.
Because the ancient Indians, I mean, when we were from America, the Bucks didn't wear any clothes. The Indian Braves didn't wear any clothes, and so they were called. It was called buck naked because that's how the Indian Braves ran around. But now they say butt and naked, and that's not the correct one. It needs to be the culturally inappropriate buck naked, like you just said.
I didn't. I guess I wasn't even aware that that's currently improper or not sensitive enough or something.
Well, if my explanation is wrong, then it's not insensitive. Maybe it applies to a deer, but I think my explanation is correct. But I don't know. Charles is just sitting there laughing. He probably knows that I'm way off base on my explanation, but I don't know.
No, it's pretty funny. I mean, deer don't wear clothes. It's true, but those don't wear any clothes either.
Yeah, right. And deer and dozy dotes and maresy dotes and the lambsy ivy. Achilles
Right.
too, wouldn't you? Well, okay. In any event, I guess we've digressed off of the topic.
Well, I mean, maybe he. One of the speculations was that your flag, in the comments this past week, that your flag represented hatred of Irish Catholics because it was the orange standard.
No, it was the original Canadian. Well, another version of it was the original Canadian flag. This became the Canadian flag just before World War II. This version with the crest, and there was a slight change in the crest in 1958 when they substituted 3 red leaves for the 3 green leaves. It was the flag of the nation was never the Orange Lodge's flag, but
It's interesting, Charles, that you just talk about that as the Irish Catholics, because just this morning, as soon as I got into the office, I had all sorts of phone calls from Ireland. And so I had to take them, I had to do some work there. And I guess it was yesterday I had that. And she wrote me, and something was successful. And she says, oh, if I celebrated Christmas, it'd be a great Christmas present. And I wrote back and I says, you don't celebrate Christmas? I said, all Christians celebrate Christmas. I mean, when my ancestors, Johnson line, first came into Boston in the 1600s, 1635, they didn't celebrate Christmas because they were Puritans. But by the early 1700s, they were celebrating Christmas. What's going on with you? And she wrote back and says, we are Calvinists, Congregationalists, which were Puritans back then. And she says, none of the Protestants in Ireland celebrate Christmas. And that seemed to be a little bit extreme for me. But had you guys heard that?
I've never heard that. Now the dominant Protestant religion in Ulster in the north is Calvinism or Presbyterianism. In the south, the Protestants were mostly Anglicans, or Church of England.
Well, she's a Calvinist, and she's from Northern Ireland, and she says we don't celebrate Christmas, and I'd never heard that. So I will have to wish her a happy Hanukkah, I guess. I don't know.
I doubt if they celebrate that either.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Paul, so are you giving up?
What if you could vacation sooner thanks to the
I'm
shopping?
trying to find out. I mean, this sounds pathetic, but I'm trying to find out how to turn this camera on. I mean, it was working last week. I
never had trouble before.
No,
well, we'll just listen to your melodious voice, and that will be enough for us.
I don't think we should hold it up for this. I will try to figure out while you're talking, and otherwise I can just hear the voice. And you can up the ratings by saying one of the members has joined a nudist colony.
Yeah. Well, if you were younger and fairer and of the opposite sex, then we would be concerned. But we don't mind. We don't mind not looking at you.
Okay. My feelings are hurt. Okay.
You totally distracted me. Anyhow, Bill, you brought up the topic that I kind of wanted to focus in when you were talking about Heidi. What's your name? Heydrich?
Byrick.
Byrick.
How do you spell it? How do you spell that name?
I don't know.
Birich, I think.
Okay.
Well, anyhow, this is, I think, one of the looming problems for white nationalists, and if there are any left, white supremacists in the United States. What are we supposed to do right now as far as negotiating the status quo with people of color? If we needed a testimony to how powerful they are, all the Confederate monuments that were taken down last year in Richmond, and I take it all over the country, are at least in negotiation to be handed over to Black activist museums. And in other words, the tables have been the world has totally been turned upside down. We are now the monkeys in the anthropology museum and the zoos. We are the weirdos. And how do we negotiate our path out of that? Because we have not just been overthrown, we are now being suppressed. A couple of weeks ago, you and I did our topic was, are we aliens in our own country? I think that it's fair to say, when I think of them handing over the Confederate monuments in Richmond to the blacks, I just think we are totally the underclass now.
Well, what they're doing when they're handling it over to this black high school, the black high school submitted a bid to take the Robert E. Lee statue and melt it down and create works that are supportive of anti-racism. And so that the city councilman of Charlottesville approved that. And I looked at the city councilman, and I think one was a person of color and the rest were white. So I think this is indicative of the attitude of the white man. They don't care about their own heritage. They're still stuck in the old anti-Jim Crow era, where they're supporting everybody and anybody except their own selves, their own race, and their own people. And if you see how we got there, we might be able to trace where we're going to go from here. I mean, it started by, there was a lot of white people who really had consciousness and wanted to remain their own identity and separation, and primarily in the South, because they had to live around a lot of blacks and they saw the difficulties of integration, and they wanted to remain separate. And so you had the Jim Crow laws that were, I think, a response to the lording over by the blacks who were given power during Reconstruction after the Civil War. And then Jim Crow laws were prevalent in the South, but there were a lot of white people that were opposed to the whites maintaining their own separation. And they had the Heidi Byrick attitude of, we have to lift everybody up. And there was a promotion for our entire lives of equality and helping affirmative action and helping, don't discriminate against anybody. And incrementally, that became what we have today. I think that there was still a lot of pride in the stars and bars up until maybe 15 years ago. I remember one of my employees was a Civil War reenactor, and we went to Moore Park to watch one of his Civil War reenactments. And there were tons of people coming there as the Confederate side for the Battle of Gettysburg or whatever it was. And they didn't have enough people donning the blue because nobody wanted to be a blue. Everybody wanted to be a Confederate. And so it was really underrepresented for the Union soldiers. And everybody back then was proud of their Confederate heritage. Then that one kid went and shot up a black church in somewhere in the South. I forget his name. Dylan Roof. And he had Confederate flags on him. And from that point on, there was a heavy move to counter the stars and bars and the Confederacy and the rebel attitude that we had there. And in the ensuing 10 years or whatever, it has really gotten to where we have today. And the same thing can be likened to the gay rights movement. There was a lot of opposition to gay rights until this shepherd kid was strung up or tied up to a fence in Wyoming. And I think it was actually done by some of his homosexual buddies. But that was a big turning point for the gay rights movement, because this poor kid became a poster child for what goes wrong when you're opposed to homosexuality. And so then incrementally we've gone further and further until now you can't even have that gal who wrote Harry Potter. She can't even be in the running for the Woman of the Year in England because she took a view against transsexualism. So this big magazine removed her from the list because she was winning. And someone as leftist and as mainstream leftist as that Harry Potter gal, J.K. Rowling's, she can't even be in the running for Person of the Year there because she's opposed transsexualism, or not even oppose it. She just says, hey, you know, biology is what it is. So we have seen the homosexual movement to become such an extreme. There's nowhere farther to go. And there is nowhere farther to go for the white nationalists. We are at our backs are against the wall. So we're going to be seeing a turning, and we are seeing a turning point. So from here, we start to build. But you have to realize that white people, and I'm sorry if I'm just pontificating and going on too long, white people always support the non-white underdog. If you take a look at that South African guy from ultimately from India, Mahatma Gandhi, when he was starting protesting in South Africa, protesting against the white people and protesting promote all these rights, and he became a big peace activist. Even today, he's the biggest peace activist out there. Why? Because the white people supported a non-white pushing that agenda. And we don't seem to want to support our own people pushing the agenda. The Republicans and the right-leaning, they will always latch on to the what's her name? Candace Owen, is that her name? The black one, or they'll latch on to there's some sort of Dinesh, some sort of Indian
Dinesh D'Souza.
And they'll do that. But then when some white person comes out like a Paul Fromm to support these things, they will beat him down with a club just like he was a little baby seal. And so I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, I feel like, honestly, I mean, I've said this before, but now so far I can't get anybody to listen, that we need to show that our way is better. And I feel like that I know you've done some of this, but I don't know that a lot of people are copying you. I know that you have tried to reach out to pro-segregation Blacks and speak on the same platform with them. But I feel like we need to really talk about the civil rights movement and what a complete fraud it was. We need to do what the leftists call deconstruction.
Yes.
We need to, one of the great deconstructionists, I think, was Alfred Schaeffer. And of course, Germany has shut him up the hard way. I think about Alfred almost every day and wonder if he'll ever see daylight again. But he was very good at that, at showing, I think, that these programs that are supposed, even what the SPLC is doing, does it really benefit Blacks? I think the answer is no. And so, I think that up to a point, we need to sort of reorient our analysis and our whole approach and say, what was Jim Crow really so bad? Because were as many Black people in jail, were as many Hispanic people in jail during the bad old days as there are now? Or has the totalitarian nature of modern society not actually transformed us into what Alex Jones calls the prison planet? There are more Blacks wearing orange right now than we're ever out picking cotton. And that's a fact. Of course, the population's a lot larger too. But, for the Black population, 15 to 45, jail is as much a fact of life as working and doing agricultural work was during slavery. Is that a positive step? Or I hate to say it, was slavery actually better?
Paul?
Well, that's I think a very good question. I would think that Donald Trump did more for Blacks then the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, and all the presidents, Republican and Democrat, since the 1960s, up until Trump, up until the COVID meltdown, had so fixed the economy that blacks were doing far better than ever. All these special programs and the tearing down the statues, and I don't see that improved their lot one little bit.
Well, Charles, you talked about deconstruction, and Paul, you talked about Donald Trump. Well, last week I was interviewed by two different women who are writing books about our views. One of the women is a writer for CNN. And of course, a lot of people told me, oh, don't talk to them, don't talk to them. But my view is to talk to everybody and to help everybody write the best book that they want to write. And if they want to write the best book criticizing us, I'm going to say everything truthful and forthright, and they can have whatever slant they want. But my attitude is to help everybody do the best job that they want to do. And so I talked a long time with this gal from CNN, and she asked me where we're going to go from here and what I thought was good. And I said, well, I think Donald Trump is really good for us. And she says, well, why would you support Donald Trump? I mean, Donald Trump doesn't support your particular views and a lot of these things. I mean, he didn't build the wall, and he did all these things. I says, no, what you're looking at it from a perspective of a Republican. The Republicans want the wall built. Well, frankly, we don't. The wall isn't going to change things. Things are too far gone that a wall isn't going to stop the great replacement. The reason why Donald Trump is so important is because he is attacking the system, and he's digging in his heels. And regardless of whether he is supporting leftist views, supporting Black people, supporting Asians, or whatever it is, he is taking a stab against the establishment, and he does some things that support us. But what we need is the person to attack the establishment, and then we can begin to build, because building a wall isn't going to change it. We need to have our own white ethno states in all around the world where white people have lived, and so that we can rebuild from there. And it takes a Donald Trump to fight the system, whether he takes our side or take the other side. We need someone to do that. And that is how the deconstruction is going to work. That's why I'm such a big supporter of Donald Trump, in spite of all of his flaws, and we know that they are legion. And I got a book for Christmas, and it was all about Donald Trump, written by Gary Trudeau, and that is Doonesbury. And Doonesbury is the most leftist, stupidest, banal cartoon, but has been around for like 30 years, very popular among the leftists. And I read all of the anti-Trump tripe in there, and it's just over the top anti-Trump silliness. And I read it and I think, a lot of that stuff is true. Trump has a lot of the faults that Gary Trudeau points out. But the point is, Donald Trump is going to help take us in the right direction, ultimately. And that's why he is a pivotal point in the future of the white race.
How did this lady from CNN react to
that? I can't believe how long we talked. How did she react? I think she was, I don't really know. I can't remember. Okay. She was mostly trying to wheedle information out of me that I couldn't give. She wanted to, so a lot of the stuff I could give her, but she wanted to know about the history of the American Freedom Party and how it got started, and she wanted to know about the Charles Martel Society, which I couldn't give her any information at all. But we talked for a long time, and I'm just sitting there talking like I'm talking now. And so when her book comes up, I just imagine I'm going to cringe, because I'm going to say, the world is black and white, and she's going to say, Johnson stresses the white, and he's a racist or something like that. I don't know, but we'll see. She can take whatever slant she wants, and I just help everybody.
What was the other interview you did?
The other interviewer was, she was a freelance. She was a research assistant for another person writing the book. And she had similar type of questions, and both of them were writing on the same thing. So I put them in touch with her. Hey, you guys are writing the same book. I told one about the other. I thought, maybe they won't like this because they're working on competitive books. But I put them together. The CNN person was much more involved. She wrote the expose of the Church of Scientologists. And I had a lot of dealings with the president of Church of Scientology. In fact, he grew up as a Mormon. And
Ron Hubbard?
No, the president of the Church of Scientology, Ron Hubbard died. The one that was Heber C. Jinch, and he's still the president of there. And Heber C. Kimball is one of the biggest Mormons out there. He had like 62 children, so all sorts of Kimballs running around. But Heber C. Jinch was a son of a Mormon couple that were polygamists in Oregon, and my father was the home teacher for him. And I didn't know this at the time, but one of his younger brothers we were friends with. And I had a Japanese lawyer who was head of the Buddhist Association of Japan came to see me, and this was like in the 1990s. And he says, our little Buddhist groups that are in the house, are they being taxed and not allowed tax exemption? Is there any church that's being exempted that are fighting your IRS? And I said, well, in LA downtown, there's the Church of Scientologists are marching all around the building right now, holding signs. He said, well, can you take me there? So we hopped in, we drove down there to the LA main courthouse, and there was a big old Dutch guy in moon boots. I didn't tell you what year it was. They're all made moon boots, watching, holding signs saying "Down with the IRS." So we went up to him. I said, "Hey, this is a lawyer for the Buddhist Association of Japan." He says, "And we're worried about the taxation issues." He says, "You got to come see our president." So we hopped in his limo and he went down to this hospital, this pink hospital or blue hospital or what it was, where the Church of Scientology has its headquarters. And we're ushered into the president's office. And it's a big, old, nice, beautiful office. And there's nothing on his desk except an old Book of Mormon.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
So I pick up this Book of Mormon and I open up the flyleaf, and it says, Heber C. Jensen, that please read this and take everything to heart. Love, your mother. And so I said, wow. So when Heber C. Jench came in to meet us, I said, how come you have a Book of Mormon on your desk? He says, well, I was raised a Mormon, and in Church of Scientology, we can still celebrate, we believe in any religion we want, and I follow the teachings as much as I can. And I said, well, that's interesting. So we talked about the IRS, we talked about Japan, and I did the translations, and we talked about the Buddhist Association, and that was a very interesting meeting. So then I went home and I told my mother, I said, hey, Mom, I just met the president of Church of Scientology named Heber C. Jench. And she says, Billy, you know who that is, don't you? And I said, no. She said, well, your father used to home teach them. They lived out in Veneta, and they were a polygamous family. And when I was secretary for the stake president, we had to excommunicate them for polygamy. But Heber C. Jench is the older brother. And I said, oh, wow, I wish I'd known that. I'd tell him that. So in any event, as in my talking to about an hour, I told the CNN reporter all about this because she wrote a book on Scientology. And so she was just really intrigued. So she asked me all about this, and she asked me all about white nationalists and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm sorry, I just keep going on and on and on. I'll be quiet for a while.
It's all right. It's pretty interesting stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
The only problem is when people go on who have nothing to say.
Yeah. I think in many ways North American society has, I hope, has bottomed out, and there is already, I think, a bit of a shakedown or shaking out, where maybe we can be more direct about what we want. The LGBTQ and the additional letters and numbers that seem to grow and grow and grow with each retelling I think they've gone as far as they can. Now the transgendered are, we're making accommodations for them and recognizing their self-identity and all that, and they are a tiny fraction of the sexually other. The non-heterosexual, I think, are about 1% of the population. They are a tiny slice of that, and yet they have hijacked much of the educational and some of the political agenda. And I think the catering to other races, especially in Canada, and the obvious replacement of our people, that's very obvious in Canada. I think a lot of people have reached a moment where they're questioning the powers that be. And I've noticed that I'm very much involved in the end of lockdown movement up here. And all sorts of people have become awakened who, 18 months ago were just living their lives and so on. But this is, for many of us, has become a freedom issue. And that now they've begun to really distrust the medical establishment and the political establishment, because we've been lied to and lied to and lied to. Back in March of 2020, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, 2 weeks in some part, in my province I live in, it became 8 months of lockdown. But businesses devastated and so on. And of course, that didn't work. Well, then masks, they had to wear masks. But canny people realized masks were useless against the virus. And the New England Journal of Medicine had a pretty definitive article in May of last year about that. Okay, then we were told when the vaccines were being rolled out that we got our vax, then we would be free of the mask. Well, it turns out that's a lie too. Now we're told, I was hearing, I believe it was Fauci the other day saying, well, to be quite frank, it's not a 2 jab process. It'll be at least 3. Well, we were told it was 2. And then we were told the jab would, I think people have begun to see we are being misled, or I think more accurately, we're being lied to again and again. And, people might differ as to what the agenda is. Is it simply an establishment that's panicked and that they ricochet from one solution to another? But it always comes down to the same thing: compulsion. And one of the interesting things is, and you'll know this from Charles, from Alfred Schaeffer, once you realize on a key issue that you've been lied to, your approach changes. Like Alfred was a kind of a mushy, get along sort of a German guy. Didn't think too deeply, but he became intrigued by 9/11. And once he realized the establishment story about 9/11 was false, it opened up his mind up. Well, maybe other things could be false. And I see that happening with a substantial minority of people that I run into at these protests. They're not all, as our Zionist enemies might say, right wingers. I mean, some are. But I've run into people who voted liberal in the last election, voted conservative, voted green, even voted socialist. And there's a substantial number of very awakened thinking people, and they are now less manipulable by the usual smears that sort of box us in. He's a white supremacist, or he's a racist, or whatever, because they know the same people who are pointing the fingers have lied to them. I see some hope there. It may be a little bit foggy, but I do see some hope there.
Oh, I agree with you. Like you mentioned about the awakened, sleeping people, and we're seeing large numbers of people are coming around, and they're being dissatisfied, and they're turning out in large numbers to protest and to battle these things. And we have seen a lot of different social movements throughout the centuries where this has started to foment and happen, and it results in change. And so I think this is the start of some major change. I agree with you, Paul. We have bottomed out. Now, like if you take a look at the Dickinson era, Charles Dickens wrote some wonderful novels, but he was also a social activist. He was an activist against, I guess, the indentured servitude and the apprenticeship system where the people in power really lorded it over the lower classes and kept them down in servitude for so long. And Charles Dickens made reference to a fellow by the name of Jack Sheppard. And so I had to look to see who Jack Sheppard was. Well, in the 1700s, Jack Sheppard was apprenticed to like a carpenter, and he'd almost finished his carpentry work, but he ended up stealing something, and he kind of devolved into a life of crime. And so he was captured and he escaped. And he captured again and he escaped. He was captured again and he escaped. And he became so well known for his escaping that Daniel Defoe, who I think wrote Robinson Crusoe, wrote his autobiography. It was really a biography, and it just sold wildly. And so finally, they decided that they were going to execute this Jack Sheppard because he was involved in what we call petty theft. So they set an execution date, and his wife, or his common law wife, had actually been a prostitute. They locked her up too, and they were going to execute him. And they both escaped. And they had sheets over the walls, and he was just a little tiny small guy, and she was a big old buxom gal, and they both escaped. So it became really popular. This Jack Sheppard was really popular. So when they finally captured him, and they were going to actually hang him, and there were 200,000 people. Most of the city, I think, of London turned out to support this Jack Sheppard, who was just a common thief, but because he bucked the system, and he was ultimately executed. He was age 22 when he executed, but almost all of the population of London were supportive of him because he was going against the system. And this is what we're seeing nowadays. We can learn from this event. People are turning out opposing the system. So we have bottomed out. We're going to see maybe another Jack Sheppard being not quite as degenerate as he was, and people are going to rally around him, and we're going to have some big change.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned Charles Dickens, something that I think many people know but don't maybe fully understand. Dickens' famous book about Christmas, The Christmas Carol, was written at a time when Christmas was not as the big feast that it became. He basically promoted it to the extent that it became much more powerful within the English culture. And of course, that spread to North America and so on. It was there, but it wasn't quite the celebration that it has become. Indeed, in much of Europe, the major celebration is still New Year's Day.
Yeah, he was a very successful social activist, really promoting good causes. Yeah, I agree.
Also, yeah.
Now, let's talk about something else just for a second here. Can you all see what I'm trying to broadcast here?
Yes. The Diary of Anne Frank.
Okay, this is this is a picture I just took today in CVS. There is a new talk about promoting social whatever.
Oh my God.
Why is this out right now on CVS? Why have they suddenly? I mean, it's a few days after Christmas. We're on the 7th day of Christmas right now, I think, or maybe it's the 6th. But that somebody explained to me why all of a sudden she appears the day before New Year's in CVS on a magazine rack in the pharmacy section.
Well, you're asking us to explain, or somebody did explain it to you?
No, I'm asking you all to explain it, because I just took this picture because I was blown away What's she doing there? What is she doing there?
I think it's part of what we talked about last week, the attack on Christmas. I mean, there's been a largely Jewish attack on Christmas going back to at least the 1940s, and this is just another way of getting at it. Put something else on the agenda, and one of the major ideological points that they have, that one of the justifications, and one of the things they use effectively to beat us down is this whole Holocaust story. And it's getting rather stale. And for many young people today, World War II is so ancient history, you know, that they constantly have to try to find a new way to get it back on the agenda. And hers is an approachable story, kind of pathetic, but you know, because it's taught as literature, but it's not literature. It's supposedly a diary. It's not even that. Much of it was doctored by her own father. Anne Frank died. No, she was not gassed or whatever. She died of typhus in the last days of the war, when typhus was, you know, spreading through the camps because they lacked food, as did most Germans. And we know he added to the diary and doctored it, because parts of it are written in ballpoint pen, and there's a kind of an uncomfortable fact. The ballpoint pen wasn't invented until 1948. She died in 45 anyway. But it's, you know, if you don't think too much about it, it's an approachable story, and it's a tearjerker. You know, a little girl, I mean, a teenage girl coming of age, and you know, having to live in somebody's attic, and you know, it's approachable. So it's a good propaganda weapon,
Well,
if you don't think about it too much.
Yeah, you also have to realize that these type of zeitgeists, or these type of cultural icons, are promoted by certain groups of people, a lot of by Jews, and it just constantly promoted. Where we will promote everyone all the time, and promote others to our own detriment. Various groups of people, the blacks will promote blacks, the Jews will promote Jews, the Hispanics will promote Cesar Chavez or whatever it is. But like, I remember when I was in high school, a play that our high school put on was The Diary of Anne Frank. And when I went to Japan, I first started studying Japanese, I wanted to buy a book to read. I went to buy a book so I could start studying Japanese, and I bought the book The Diary of Anne Frank, translated to Japanese, to read that. It's because in my mind, that was just such a phenomenon, like a story, that I wanted to read it. And I didn't realize until much later that that you have people pushing their own group. I mean, like Einstein, everyone calls Einstein the greatest mind out there, but we ignore Sir Isaac Newton or Niels Bohr or some people that were truly great. It's just that we promote everybody, and these various isolated groups will promote their own, and we just fall into it. You know, Albert Einstein, or Alfred Einstein, or whatever his name was not any smarter than Donald Trump. If you ask Donald Trump, he's smarter. But we instead of promoting Sir Isaac Newton or some really sharp people, we'll just say, oh, Einstein, he's an Einstein. And same thing with Diary of Anne Frank. We need to start putting our own people up there. We need to start promoting Arminius, Hermann the German, or Alfred the Great, or Charles Lincoln, something like that.
Well, it's just interesting because, I mean, this CVS is historically important to our movement. I doubt if any of you have visited it, even if you've been to New Orleans. This is the CVS, which, when it was a private pharmacy, had a private owner who was the man who invited David Duke into the KKK. It's a little known fact. Obviously, he sold out to, I believe, first Katzenbesthoff, and then Katzenbesthoff sold to Osco, which became CVS. But look at this place. The most prominent thing is what what Paul was talking about, COVID-19 updates, actualizaciones de COVID. We care about your health and safety. That's the primary agenda. And then all of a sudden you've got Anne Frank appearing right between detox and cleanse and keto. I'm not even sure what keto is. It's kind of diet, right? I mean, this is interesting because this is in uptown New Orleans. This is in what used to be basically one of the monumental neighborhoods that defined what the Old South was, the old white Anglican South. It's triangulated between three beautiful Anglican churches, Saint George, the Cathedral, and the one where I go, Trinity. And it's and very close to Tulane University. And COVID is the big thing. Trashy magazines interspersed with Anne Frank. Where can we penetrate this picture, Bill? I mean, can we pay to have a glossy magazine on Alfred the Great, for instance? I mean, I'd rather start with Alfred the Great than Charles Lincoln.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I got to leave because I got an appointment at 5 o'clock and I'm gonna have to drive to it. But I do think that we are starting to promote our own, and we need to stop cringing when we promote our own people and we say, the first thing is I told some people recently that I was opposed to interracial marriage. I didn't like this person because he interracially married, and all the young kids around there, they just cringed. Oh, you can't say that, but we need to start being proud of who we are and want to preserve ourselves and not be afraid to promote our own people. And with that,
question for both of you. Could we meet again to talk specifically about the Confederate monuments?
Yes.
Yes.
Do either of you have any time this weekend?
Yes.
How about 7 my time tomorrow?
Yes.
Paul?
Tomorrow, Saturday, 7, so that will be 8.
8.
Yeah. Are you Central Time?
Yeah.
8 o'clock tomorrow night.
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Bye, guys.
By this time, I may get the video working.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I don't know how to get my screen back, so I have to stop share and then end. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot